graveyard shift, has a rhythm. There is a kind of peace that only exists inside a building after everyone has left it. I don't mean peace like quiet. I mean peace like the pause between two heartbeats, the moment when the world isn't generating anything new, when all the noise that people bring with them has gone home to their apartments and their families and their warm, unremarkable evenings. What stays behind is just the building itself, its skeleton, the hum of its ventilation systems, the occasional tick of its pipes, the fluorescent lights doing what fluorescent lights always do, which is buzz faintly and flicker in a way that you stop noticing after the first month and start noticing again around month 6, usually somewhere around 2 in the morning when you haven't slept properly in 3 days. I've been the night records assistant at the Coalgrove Regional High School for 11 months now. I took the job because it paid slightly better than the overnight shelf-stocking position at the grocery distribution warehouse I'd been working before, and because the posting said clerical and archival maintenance, evening hours, which sounded genuinely like something I could do without interacting with another human being for 8 hours straight. I was going through a phase, I told my sister when she asked, a phase of needing very little. The job is exactly what it sounds like. The district digitization initiative, the one that's been in progress for going on 7 years now, requires someone to sit in the records annex of the East Corridor, open boxes of paper files, enter the relevant data into a system called CARIS, which stands for something I've never once been told, and then reseal the boxes and stack them on the shelves that line every wall of the room from floor to nearly ceiling. The files go back to 1962. The school was built in 1958. Someone, at some point, threw away the first 4 years of records. I think about that sometimes, in the way you think about small senseless losses, 1958 to 1961, gone. Students who enrolled and graduated and never made it into the database, a kind of accidental erasure the district probably didn't even notice. My supervisor is a woman named Delphine Okafor, who works days and leaves me a laminated instruction card every evening under the door of the records annex. The card always says the same thing, more or less. Log in. Process box series, X through X. Flag any incomplete enrollment files. Do not move boxes from the pre-1990 section without authorization. Log out. The card changes only in the box numbers, which advance by 2 or 3 each night, depending on how dense the files are. I have met Delphine in person 4 times. She is a small woman who wears the same navy cardigan to every meeting and speaks in the measured, slightly careful way of someone who has spent years managing expectations. She smells faintly of coffee and hand lotion. She has never, in 4 meetings or 17 email exchanges, seemed like someone who would hide something from me. I want to note that, because later I will wonder. My shift runs 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. I park behind the gym, enter through the service entrance on the south side, using a keycard that's been reprogrammed so many times the plastic has stress cracks along one edge, and walk the East Corridor to the records annex. The East Corridor is the longest hallway in the school. It runs the full length of the building, maybe 300 feet, and it is lit the entire way by a double row of fluorescent tubes that have, over the decades, been replaced at different times and with different generations of bulbs. so the light quality changes as you walk. Bright white near the office wing, slightly yellowed in the middle section where the science classrooms are, and then, toward the far end, near the gymnasium junction, a kind of sickly greenish cast from tubes that are probably 15 years old and have never been swapped out, because that end of the corridor doesn't officially fall under the custodial maintenance budget anymore. Something about a redistricting of building zones, the kind of thing that creates a hallway nobody is technically responsible for. I walk that hallway every night. I stop noticing it, the way you stop noticing the face of someone you've eaten lunch with for a decade. It's just the hallway. It smells like industrial cleaner, an old carpet adhesive, and very faintly, underneath everything, like the specific dusty warmth of 1,000 textbooks slowly releasing their age. I don't know when I started finding it beautiful. Somewhere around month 3, I think. When the silence started to feel like a presence instead of an absence. The records annex is a room approximately 20 by 30 feet. It has one window, which faces the interior courtyard and is frosted, so I can see light or dark through it, but nothing specific. It has a desk that predates me significantly, the kind with a particle board top and metal legs, grey, with scratches, and 2 dried rings from coffee mugs whose owners graduated or resigned or transferred a long time ago. It has a computer that runs an operating system I won't name because it will date me in the worst possible way. It has a rolling cart that I use to transport file boxes. The cart has one wheel that drags slightly, creating a rhythmic scuff and roll across the linoleum that I've come to associate with the start of my evening, the way other people associate the sound of a coffee machine with theirs. Every night I arrive. I check in on the logbook by the door. I sit down. I begin. For the first 6 months, that was essentially the entirety of my experience at Colgrove Regional High School. Process files. Drink the coffee I bring in a thermos. Eat a granola bar at midnight. Hear the rain when it rained. Hear nothing when it didn't. Walk to the staff bathroom at the end of the East Corridor at 2 a.m. because that's when I need to, reliably, every night. Walk back, finish processing, log out, drive home in the blue-grey pre-dawn. Nothing happened. Nothing was supposed to happen. Then, in my 7th month, at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, the PA system turned on. I want to be careful about how I describe this because the honest version doesn't sound like much. There was a click, a soft burst of static, the kind you'd get from an old intercom, the kind that has a speaker grill caked with dust and a transmitter that hasn't been serviced since the building's last renovation, which was 2004. And then a voice. The voice was female, flat, not robotic exactly, not synthesized, but emptied of effect in the way that people sometimes are when they're reading from a list and the meaning of the words has stopped registering. A processing voice, a voice that exists only to convey information, not to be heard. It said, attendance verification, period 7, homeroom section 204. And then it began reading names. I remember sitting very still at my desk. I remember the fluorescent light above me producing its usual faint buzzing. I remember the ventilation system exhaling through the duct above the window. I remember these things because when something unexpected happens in a very quiet place, The ordinary details become suddenly vivid, the way they do when your brain is trying to establish whether you're in danger. The names were last name first, standard attendance format, flat pause between each one. Abernethy, Connor, Bautista, Rosa, Bellamy, Desmond. I assumed reasonably. I still believed that there was some kind of automated system misfiring. Schools have them. Pre-programmed announcements for weather delays, for bell schedules, for emergency drills. Something scheduled incorrectly. A timer that hadn't been updated during daylight saving. These things happen. These are the kinds of things I deal with in the records annex all the time. Outdated data, legacy systems that no one remembers configuring. Automated processes operating faithfully on instructions that were written down by someone who no longer works here. The voice read 16 names and then stopped. The static returned briefly and then cut. I went back to my files. In the morning, I mentioned it in an email to Delphine. I asked if there was an automated announcement system I should be aware of, and whether it was supposed to run at night, and whether I needed to do anything about it, or simply log it. Delphine replied 6 hours later. Thanks for flagging. The PA system does have some legacy automation still connected to the old bell schedule. Facilities has been aware. It shouldn't be disruptive. Let me know if it becomes an issue. I read this email twice. I decided it was a reasonable answer. I filed it under building systems in my mental organizational structure and did not think about it again for approximately 10 days, at which point the PA system turned on again. Part 2. What the records contain. 11:17 p.m. again. I looked at the clock on my computer when the static started. 11:17, the same as before, and I remember feeling something that wasn't quite unease, more like the specific low-level alertness of noticing a pattern. I am good at noticing patterns. It's most of what the job requires. Actually seeing when an enrollment number is missing, when a date doesn't align, when a name appears in 2 different files with 2 different birth dates. Patterns are the texture of archival work. The voice again. Attendance verification. Period 7. Homeroom section 204. The same section. The same 16 names, in the same order, with the same flat pauses between them. Abernethy, Connor, Bautista, Rosa, Bellamy, Desmond. I put down my pen. I listened to the full list. I wrote down every name. This time, I looked them up. Caris, for all its ancient slowness, does contain enrollment records, current and historical. You can search by name, by graduation year, by student ID. It's not fast, and its search function has peculiarities. It doesn't handle hyphens well. It occasionally returns duplicate records for students who were enrolled more than once, but it works. I spent the hour between midnight and 1 in the morning typing in the 16 names from the list. 13 of them returned results. All 13 were former students. The graduation years ranged from 1987 to 2011. Homeroom section 204 appeared in the records of 6 of them. 3 graduated, 2 transferred, 1 listed as withdrawn. The records for the other 7 linked them to different homerooms and different years, which was strange. Why would an attendance list for section 204 contain students from 6 different homerooms, unless the list wasn't organized by current assignment, unless it was organized by something else? 3 names return nothing. No student records, no enrollment history, no files, incomplete or otherwise. I noted this and moved on because there are always gaps in old records. That's the nature of the work. The pre-1990 files are the worst boxes of folders where the enrollment numbers are handwritten in ink that has faded to near illegibility, where the carbon copy forms have degraded so thoroughly that some pages are essentially archaeological specimens. People fall through systems. They always have. I find their absence all the time, and I file a flag note, and I move on. I filed a flag note for the 3 missing names. I moved on, but I kept the list. I don't know exactly when I started to understand that the list was changing. It was slow, the kind of thing that you don't catch immediately because it doesn't announce itself as significant. It announces itself as a discrepancy, which is different. Discrepancies are my job. They are the whole substance of my job, actually. I find them, I note them, I pass them up the chain. They do not, as a rule, disturb me. The third occurrence of the announcement was on a Thursday, 11:17 p.m. The same section, the same opening, but the list had 17 names. There was one addition, inserted between Galloway, Miriam, and Hendricks. Paul, a name I hadn't heard before. Garland, Thomas. I searched Caris the next morning. Thomas Garland. No results. I searched again the following week, after the 4th announcement, which had 18 names. The new addition was Crane, Eloise, inserted between Bautista, Rosa, and Bellamy, Desmond. Caris returned nothing for Eloise Crane. No enrollment record, no transfer record, no archive flag. I started keeping a dedicated log. I'm a naturally systematic person, I told you that. I bought a composition notebook at the pharmacy on my way to work, the black and white speckled kind that children use for school, and I started writing everything down. Every announcement, every name, every addition, every date and time, which was always 11:17 p.m., always Tuesday or Thursday, always the same section. By month 2 of this, which put me at 9 months into my employment at Colgrove, I had a list of 23 names. 7 of them did not exist in any system I could access. Part 3. The weight of small things. I should tell you about the school at night. I mean the specific texture of it, because it matters. Because I think some of what happened to me, some of the things I noticed that I might otherwise have dismissed, was only possible because of the particular quality of being alone in that building after 11 o'clock, when even the cleaning crew has finished and gone home, and the last car has left the parking lot, and you become, functionally, the only living person in 187,000 square feet of 1958 institutional architecture. The East Corridor doesn't have windows that face outside. Its windows face the interior courtyard, which means that when it rains, and that fall and winter, it rained constantly. That particular Pacific Northwest grey that isn't dramatic or stormy, but just present. Like weather, as a chronic condition, the sound of rain comes to you filtered and softened, caught in the courtyard and reflected back through frosted glass. It sounds like someone in a distant room running water. It sounds like something that is almost a voice. The lockers are old, the kind with combination locks and metal doors that haven't been truly flush with their frames in years. When the building's heating system cycles on, the expansion of the pipes produces a series of soft metallic sounds. the kind that, if you are not paying attention, could pass for a locker door being carefully opened, the latch lifting, the hinges shifting. I stopped reacting to these sounds around month 4. By month 9, I had stopped hearing them consciously at all, the way you stop consciously hearing traffic if you live near a busy street. The security monitors are in the main office, which I pass every night on my way to the records annex. The main office has a glass front, big institutional windows looking out into the east corridor, and through them you can see the bank of monitors that the security system runs continuously. 8 cameras covering the main entrance, the gymnasium doors, the student parking lot, the cafeteria, the east and west corridors, and 2 interior shots of hallways that I've never learned the location of. The cameras are motion sensitive. When nothing is moving, the feeds go slightly dim, cycling through at slower intervals. When something crosses a field of view, the corresponding monitor brightens and the camera recenters. I don't have access to the main office after hours. The door requires an administrative override that my keycard doesn't carry, but I can see the monitors through the glass. I've looked at them every night for 11 months. I want to be very precise about what I'm about to tell you, because I know how it sounds, and I need you to understand that I'm not given to exaggeration. It's professionally inconvenient and personally distasteful, and I've always found people who embellish their experiences fundamentally untrustworthy, in the way that anyone is untrustworthy when they can't tell the difference between what happened and what it felt like. In November, the 2nd month of my name logging, I walked past the main office windows at approximately 12:40 a.m. I looked at the monitors. I do this every time I pass. It's automatic. The way you glance at a clock, even when you don't particularly need to know the time. The monitor for the west corridor, the corridor that runs parallel to the east, behind the main building, connecting the art rooms and the library, was bright, motion-triggered, and in the center of the feed, in the flat grey-green of night vision footage, something was moving. I stopped walking. The figure was small, child-sized, moving down the corridor in the direction of the library, walking at a normal pace, unhurried. No features. The camera was too far, and the resolution too low, but a silhouette. Backpack, I thought. And then I didn't know why I thought that. And then I looked more carefully, and yes, the slight bulk of a backpack on the figure's shoulders, the kind students wear. I stood there for what I think was about 45 seconds. The figure walked to the end of the corridor and out of the frame. The monitor dimmed. I went back to my annex and sat at my desk for a long time without opening any files. In the morning, I wrote an email to Delphine. I described what I'd seen. I asked if there was any authorized personnel who might be in the west corridor after midnight, janitorial staff, maintenance, anyone. I asked if students were ever on campus after hours for any sanctioned reason. Delphine replied, "I'll check with the security coordinator. Probably a reflection of the glass or a false trigger from one of the exterior lights. The west corridor cameras are old. Thanks for logging it." I read this email 3 times. I did not believe it was a reflection. I know what a reflection looks like. I spent 6 weeks of my 2nd month at Colgrove tracking down a recurring anomaly in the science wing monitors that turned out to be a mylar balloon that had gotten into the ceiling space and was drifting in the ventilation current. I know what false triggers look like. They look like formless flickers. They don't look like small people with backpacks walking purposefully toward the library at 12:40 in the morning. But I wrote noted, thank you in reply, and closed the email because what I wanted was an explanation, not a conflict. And because some part of me was already doing the thing I've noticed I do under sustained stress, which is to construct the most reasonable available interpretation of events and inhabit it with tremendous force, like building a shelter. Part 4. Garland, Thomas. The name started bothering me around mid-December. I don't know why that one in particular. There were 7 names without records by then, and Thomas Garland was the first of the additions, the first departure from the original 16. Maybe that's why. He was where the list had started to grow. I began searching for him outside of Caris. The district's public records portal archived yearbooks that the school's library had scanned and posted online. Though the project was incomplete, they'd done 1990 through 2003 and then apparently stopped. Old newspaper archives. The district newsletter, which was posted publicly as PDFs going back to 2007. I found a Thomas Garland mentioned in the Colgrove Regional PTA newsletter from March 2009. He was listed under a section titled In Our Thoughts, which appeared to be a memorial section, the kind that schools add to newsletters after a loss. The entry was 3 sentences. Thomas Garland, a junior in Mrs. Aldridge's 3rd period English class, passed away on February 28th. He was 16 years old. Our thoughts are with his family during this difficult time. No cause of death. No additional detail. 3 sentences, and then the newsletter moved on to an announcement about the spring fundraiser car wash. I searched for any news coverage. I found a brief item in the regional paper, the kind that runs 6 sentences and a school photo and nothing else, because that's what local papers do with student deaths. They give them the minimum coverage that acknowledges the fact without exploring it, because there are liability attorneys and grieving families and the whole institutional reflex toward containment. The item confirmed his name and age and the date. It said he had been a student at Colgrove Regional for 2 years. It said the school counselling team was available for students who needed support. Thomas Garland had been in homeroom, section 204. I went back through my log. The original 16 names from the first announcement. I had recorded their enrollment history in Caris graduation years, homeroom sections, last known status. I had noted which ones showed section 204 specifically. Now, I went back and cross-referenced differently. I looked up every name individually in the newspaper archives. It took me 3 nights. My filebox quota fell behind, and I let it, which I'd never done before. By the end of the 3rd night, I had found records for 12 of the original 16. 7 had graduated without significant incident. 2 had transferred. 1 to a school in Oregon. 1 to an institution the article described only as a specialized residential program, which is a phrase that exists to avoid saying other things. 1 had been in a car accident 2 years after graduating that the paper covered because it closed a highway for 6 hours. 1 had died. 1 was the subject of a missing persons notice from 2013, a 16-year-old who had apparently left campus one afternoon and not been seen again. The notice had run once and then disappeared from coverage. The missing student's name was Eloise Crane, the 2nd addition to the list. I sat with this for a long time. I want to be very careful here. I want to be precise. I am not claiming I was not claiming then. I am not claiming now that the PA system knew something. I don't claim that. I am only noting that a system running automated attendance at 11:17 p.m. in an empty school was calling the names of dead and missing students, and that the list was growing, and that the names being added were not in any database I could access, and that nobody in administration appeared to find this remarkable. What I was experiencing was not fear exactly. Fear moves. Fear has adrenaline in it, a physical quality. What I was experiencing was closer to the feeling of reading a sentence that you realize, halfway through, has been constructed to communicate something different from what it appears to be saying. A decoding sensation, patient and cold. Part 5. January. In January, the footsteps started. I say started. I want to be careful about that too. I don't know when they started. I know when I started noticing them, which is different. The honest possibility is that they had always been there, in the building's ordinary acoustic life, and I had simply been filtering them out as background noise, the way I filtered out the locker sounds and the pipe expansion and the ventilation hum. What changed in January was that I began to notice them after the announcements. The pattern was this. The PA would run at 11:17. The 16, 17, now 22, now 23 names, flat and unhurried, the static click of it ending. And then, in the 30 to 45 seconds following the click, a sound from the east corridor. Footsteps, the soft scuff of rubber soles on linoleum, moving from what sounded like the far end of the corridor, the green-lit end near the gymnasium junction toward me. They always stopped. I mean, they always faded. Not like someone stopping suddenly, more like someone turning off into a side corridor or entering a room, or simply moving far enough away that the sound fell below the threshold of what I could distinguish from the building's ambient noise. They never came close enough to be alarming. They never came close enough to the records annex that I felt I should investigate, or should leave, or should call anyone. But they were consistent, post-announcement every time, and they were always footsteps, light ones, small ones, if you can characterize sound that way, which I recognize you cannot do scientifically, but which describes my perception accurately. I started leaving my annex door open. The east corridor from the annex threshold looks like this. To the left, toward the office wing, the hallway is bright and empty and clearly unoccupied. To the right, toward the science classrooms and the gymnasium junction, the hallway goes through the color progression I described earlier: white, then yellow, then greenish, and terminates in a T-junction about 150 feet away that I cannot fully see from my position because of a slight curve in the corridor's layout. The lockers run along the right wall. The classroom doors run along the left. Every night in January, I opened my door after the announcement and looked right. The hallway was always empty. I would stand there for a minute, sometimes two, listening to the footsteps fade, looking at the empty hallway with its buzzing light and its rows of lockers and its closed classroom doors, listening to the rain in the courtyard. Then I would go back to my desk and continue. On January 19th, the announcement ran, and 23 names were read, as usual, and the static cut, and I opened my door and turned right. One of the classroom doors was open. Room 208. I know this because I looked at the number plate, the little metal holder beside the door with the placard inside it, the kind that gets updated when a teacher changes rooms, but not always. So sometimes the name on the placard is for a teacher who left years ago. Room 208. Mr. D. Holloway, Social Studies. I don't know if there's a D. Holloway who currently teaches social studies at Coal Grove Regional. I've never been here during school hours. For all I know, Mr. Holloway has been in room 208 for 20 years. For all I know, he graduated from the school himself in 1985 and the placard predates him. The door was open, not wide, maybe 40 degrees. The light inside was off. The interior of the room was the particular deep grey of a space that has only ambient light, the kind that comes under doors and around windows and from sources too diffuse to identify. I could see the front edge of a row of desks, the lower section of a whiteboard. The lockers, directly across from room 208, had one door that was not fully latched. It was hanging open perhaps an inch, the latch bar not quite engaged in its catch. I stood in the doorway of my annex for a long time. Then I walked the 40 feet to room 208, pushed the door closed and walked back. I did not look inside the room. I want to be transparent about that. I tell you this not to build suspense, but because I think it accurately represents my psychological state at that point in my employment at Coal Grove Regional High School, which was, I did not want to know. I had decided, with the kind of deliberate cognitive effort that you apply when you are functioning normally, but not sleeping well and not eating well and spending 8 hours a night in a building that has started to feel like it's showing you things, that I was going to do my job, process my files, and not look inside dark rooms that were unexpectedly open at midnight. This was not bravery. This was not incuriosity. This was the specific emotional management strategy of someone who has decided that the most important thing is to remain functional. Part 6. What the archive contains. In February, I found the box. The boxes in the records annex are organized by decade, and then by year, and then alphabetically by student last name. Most of them have a handwritten label on the end year range, section classification, and most of those labels have held up well enough to read, though the oldest ones require you to tilt them toward the light and squint. The box I'm describing was in the pre-1990 section, which I'm technically not supposed to touch without authorization. I'd been given authorization for a batch of 1986 to 88 files 2 weeks earlier, and I'd been working through them methodically. The box I found was labeled 1988 to 1991, Administrative Internal Section 204. Do not digitize. I want to stress that the instruction, do not digitize, on an archive box is not unusual. There are categories of records, certain disciplinary files, certain medical referral forms, anything that involves a police contact or a custody dispute that the district has designated as exempt from the digitization initiative for privacy or legal reasons. I find these boxes regularly. I note them and I leave them alone. I had never before found a box labeled by section number. Students are not organized by section number in the archive. They are organized by year and by last name. A homeroom section designation appears in a student's individual file. but it's not used as a filing category. There would be no archival logic to creating a box labeled Section 204 unless someone wanted to collect records that weren't meant to be filed in the normal way, unless someone wanted to keep them separate. I put the box on my card. I brought it to my desk. I am aware that I wasn't supposed to open it. I'm aware that do not digitize might, by a certain interpretation, mean do not touch. I'm also aware that in 11 months of employment, I had never once done anything outside my explicit job parameters, had never opened an unauthorized box, had never looked at a file without it being in my queue. I want you to understand that I'm telling you this so that you understand what it meant that I opened it. The box contained 53 folders. Each folder held a student's file, name, enrollment date, homeroom section, 204, every one, and a series of internal documents that were unlike any student files I'd processed before. Not enrollment forms, not transcripts, something that looked like incident reports, the kind you fill out after a disciplinary event or a medical situation, but with different headers. The header read Coalgrove Regional Counselling Services ongoing monitoring note, and below that a date, and below that, in a space labeled status, one of two words, enrolled or unresolved. I sat with this for a long time. Enrolled made sense. Students are enrolled. That's a standard status. Unresolved was not a standard status. I had processed thousands of student files. I had never once seen a student status listed as unresolved. Statuses are things like active, graduated, transferred, withdrawn, deceased. They are factual. They describe an ending or a continuation. Unresolved is not an ending, and it is not a continuation. Unresolved means something else. It means the file is still open. It means whatever the file is tracking has not concluded. 22 of the 53 folders had the status unresolved. I counted the names on my log, the names from the announcements without Caris records. 22. I did not open any of the individual folders. I put the box back on its shelf. I went back to my desk and sat in the fluorescent buzzing for a while. And then I opened my authorized file boxes and processed my quota for the night, slowly, one form at a time, with the ventilation humming and the rain doing what the rain did, and the clock above my door marking time with the soft, institutional precision of something that has never been asked to stop. At 5 a.m., I logged out. I walked the east corridor to the service entrance. I drove home. I did not sleep that day. I lay in my apartment and looked at the ceiling and listened to the traffic outside and thought about the word unresolved, part 7, the 24th name. I had been at Coalgrove Regional High School for exactly 11 months when it happened. I've been trying to figure out how to write this section for a long time. The challenge is not accuracy. I know exactly what happened and in what order. And I remember it with the specific clarity of events that your brain decides are important and stores in full resolution rather than the compressed thumbnail format of ordinary memory. The challenge is that it will sound like something it wasn't. It will sound like the climax of a story, which is a shape I'm uncomfortable with because my experience of it was not a climax. It was quieter than that. It was more frightening than that, actually, precisely because of how quiet it was. The announcement ran at 11:17, as always, 23 names in order. I had them memorized by this point, Not deliberately, the way you memorize something for an exam, but the way you memorize the particular sequence of turns between your home and your workplace, through sheer accumulated repetition until the information lives somewhere below conscious thought. Abernethy, Connor, Bautista, Rosa. I was logging the time in my composition notebook. My pen was moving. Bellamy, Desmond, Crane, Eloise. The static, the flat, unhurried pause. And then a sound I had not heard before. Not a name from the list. Not the voice reading the list. A different sound, lower and further away in the audio than the announcement voice. The way a sound is different when it's happening near a microphone rather than through a microphone. A kind of breath, a slight ambient sound, the way a room sounds when someone is standing in it, and then in a voice that was distinctly, unmistakably different from the announcement voice, quieter, rougher at the edges, the way a voice sounds after a long silence, a single word. Here. My pen stopped moving. The announcement continued. It read the next name, and the one after that, in exactly the same flat tone as always, and completed the list and clicked off, and the static dissipated, and the ventilation hummed, and the rain continued in the courtyard, and I sat at my desk without moving for a period of time I cannot accurately estimate. Then I opened my composition notebook to the page with the running list. I found the name that came before here, the name that had been read in the pause before the sound. I looked at it, Garland, Thomas. I looked at the name for a long time. Then, because I am a records assistant and this is what I do, I turned to a fresh page and I wrote down what had happened. I noted the time. 11:23 p.m. I noted the location of the anomaly in the sequence. Between names 12 and 13, I noted the nature of the sound, vocal, single word, possibly a response. I noted, in parentheses, that this was the first instance of deviation from the standard announcement pattern in my 11 months of employment. I wrote it down. I documented it, because documentation is the only tool I have, and also because I think, at some level, I didn't want to examine too closely. I was afraid that, if I didn't write it down, I would spend the rest of my life trying to decide if I'd really heard it. The footsteps came after the announcement, as they always did. I sat at my desk with my door open. The east corridor was empty, right to the T-junction. The lights buzzed. A locker ticked. I went back to my files. In the morning, I sent Delphine a detailed email. I described the sound. I described the pattern of announcements I had been tracking for 4 months. I attached a document with the complete name log. I asked directly whether she was aware that the announcement system appeared to be calling the names of deceased and missing former students, and whether this had been disclosed to anyone in the district administration, and whether there were records related to Homeroom Section 204 that I should be aware of for archival purposes. I sent it at 5:08 a.m. from the parking lot behind the gym, sitting in my car. Delphine responded at 9:44 a.m. Her email was the longest she had ever sent me. It began with an expression of concern for my well-being. It noted that the overnight shift could be taxing and that the district had an employee assistance program if I ever wanted to speak with someone. It acknowledged the PA system irregularities and said that a work order had been submitted to have the legacy automation reviewed. It said that Section 204 records were subject to district privacy protocols and that Any questions about specific student files should be directed to the district's Student Records Office. It thanked me for my thoroughness and my attention to detail, which it described as an asset to the project. It did not answer a single one of my questions. I read it in the parking lot with my engine idling and the heater running, and the grey February sky pressing down on everything. I read it twice. I thought about the 53 folders. I thought about the word unresolved. I thought about a 16-year-old saying here into a microphone at 11-something at night in an empty school. I thought about what it means for a system to keep calling your name. Part 8. The morning after the morning after. I went back that night. Of course I did. My composition notebook has 40 pages in it now. The list of names occupies 3 pages. My incident log occupies 9. Notes on the archival box occupy 2. What I'm writing right now, this account started as entries in the notebook and has expanded into something else, something I'm not entirely sure of the purpose of yet. Maybe just the need to put it in order, to externalize it, to make it exist somewhere outside my own exhausted head. The 24th name appeared 2 weeks after the Here incident. I heard it at 11:17, the new name inserted between Markham, Delia, and Novak, Finn, and I went to my notebook and I wrote it down before I looked it up. The way you write something down before you let yourself react to it. The name was mine. My last name, my first name, correctly spelled, correctly ordered. My name, in the flat, unhurried voice of a system reading attendance in an empty school at 11:17 p.m., in the same sequence as the names of dead and missing students, in the same section that has appeared on 22 unresolved files in a box that was never supposed to be opened. I sat at my desk. I did not say here. I thought about this, whether this qualified as a decision, whether there is something meaningful about not answering an attendance list in an empty building, whether the refusal matters, or whether, as with most institutional systems, your participation or non-participation is noted equally, and the record is updated either way. The footsteps came after the announcement, as they always do. I kept my door closed this time. The scuff and quiet of small feet on linoleum passing somewhere in the direction of the corridor, fading before they reached me. I submitted my resignation 3 days later. I emailed it at 5 a.m. from the parking lot, same as always. I cited personal reasons. I gave the standard 2 weeks. Delphine's response was warm and brief. She thanked me for my service to the project. She noted that significant progress had been made on the digitization initiative under my tenure. She said the records annex would be in good hands and that she hoped I'd find something that suited me well. No mention of my name on the list. No acknowledgement of my previous email. No suggestion that anything was unusual. In my final 2 weeks, I processed my quotas. I walked the East Corridor. I heard the announcements at 11:17 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I did not log them anymore. I did not open my door after them. I did not look at the security monitors when I passed the office. On my last night of Thursday, I arrived at 9 p.m., checked in on the logbook, sat at my desk, opened my final box of files, and worked until 11:15. Then I closed the box, capped my pen, folded my hands on the desk. 11:17. The static. Attendance verification. Period 7. Homeroom section 204. 25 names. My name was still on the list. After it, a new name, someone I hadn't heard before, a name I didn't recognize. I searched it the next morning out of habit and found nothing in Caris. No enrollment record, no history. A name that existed in the system, only as sound. Epilogue. What the system requires. I don't work at Cold Grove Regional High School anymore. I don't know who they hired to replace me, or whether they've hired anyone yet. The digitization initiative will continue regardless. It always continues. These projects outlast the people assigned to them. They are the kind of institutional ambition that survives by being too large and too slow to be cancelled and too incremental to be completed. And so they simply proceed, box by box, name by name, year by year, in a room that is lit by fluorescent tubes and accessible through a door that a replacement worker will learn to open with a cracked keycard, and that smells, underneath the cleaner and the old paper, like something I can't name. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:17 p.m., Homeroom Section 204 is called to attendance. The list, as of my last night, contained 25 names. I don't know if it's still growing. I don't know if the new worker will notice. I don't know if they will keep a notebook. I don't know if they will hear the footsteps or see the figure on the West Corridor monitor or find the box with its 53 folders and its 22 unresolved files. I don't know if the system will add their name to the list. What I know is this: the system runs because the system runs. It was programmed by someone who no longer works at Cold Grove Regional at some point before I arrived, for reasons I could not determine. It calls the names of former students, graduated, transferred, dead, missing at the same time, twice a week, with the same flat and unhurried voice. It has been doing this for longer than anyone in the administration appears to be willing to tell me. It will continue to do this after I leave and after whoever replaces me leaves, and probably after the building has been renovated and the old PA hardware has been pulled out and replaced with something newer, cleaner, more efficient. Because systems like this don't end when the hardware changes. The data migrates, the list migrates, the names go with it into the new system, patient and sorted and waiting to be called. Section 204 is still on the roster. Attendance is still taken. And somewhere in the East Corridor of Cold Grove Regional High School, after the static cuts and the announcement ends, someone is still walking. You can hear it if you listen. The scuff of small feet on linoleum. The sound of someone moving toward a room they haven't been called away from. Not officially. Not in any record that anyone has shown me. Not in any document that Delphine Okafor or the District Student Records Office will acknowledge or discuss. They are present. The system has always known. Every night at 11:17, it calls them back and marks them down, and the file stays open, and the hallway echoes, and the fluorescent lights hum their single note over the empty corridor, and the attendance sheet gets signed by no one in a room that no one is authorized to enter. And in the morning the day staff arrive, and the students arrive, and the building fills up with sound and life and motion. And all of it moves on top of this other thing, this quieter thing, this system still running underneath everything, like a current you can't see, but can feel when you stand close enough to the water. I left. But they are still there, And if you ever find yourself in a building like that, one old, institutional, fluorescent lit, empty after 9, and if you hear, at some particular time, a voice begin to read names in a flat and unhurried tone, don't answer. Just don't answer, because the list is already written, and they'll mark you present regardless. End.